Welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I enjoyed every second of listening to James Szubski's accounts of the incredible paranormal experiences he's had living and working in the Columbia River Gorge in the state of Washington. We talk about the Klickitat Ape Cat, Sasquatch, and UFOs. He has cool video footage that he shares, so if you're listening to the audio podcast, you may want to zip through the video version later so you can see those images. But he does a great job of describing what we're looking at for those who aren't able to see the video. I also just love James's perspective of how these mysterious phenomena don't need to be frightening, even though they're so unusual. James Szubski is the Chief Operating Officer of Margie's Outdoor Store, located deep within the Columbia River Gorge in Washington state. In 2022, his store initiated a paranormal reporting program, which has now received well over 360 reports of strange activity in the gorge area. James is a former volunteer search and rescue EMT, a wildland firefighter, a mountain guide, and a highly decorated U.S. Army infantry veteran. He currently volunteers his time as the leader of the Klickitat Ape Cat research team. So we'll get into this in just a second. I am so excited about the Sedona Ascension Retreat, March 14th to the 16th, 2025. I can't wait to see amazing guests such as Bashar, Robert Edward Grant, Billy Carson, William Henry, and previous meditation conversation guests like Adam Apollo, psychic lawyer Mark Anthony, Alan Steinfeld, and Vivian Chavot, plus so many other amazing guests. Use code KaraGoodwin5 for 5% off your ticket. I hope to see you there. Well, welcome, James. I am thrilled to have this discussion. I can't wait to dive into this. Thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
So I'm so excited. We're going to dive into your experience with all of these strange activities that are happening in the Columbia River Gorge area. So let's talk about the types of encounters that have been reported there. If you can just kind of lead us into what has life been like in this area for you?
You know, we have had more than 350 reports in the store, and it's everything from Sasquatch, UFOs to glowing orbs. There's this creature we call the Klickitat
I'm
Ape
listening. Cat. Like everything you say, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's so cool.
Yeah, there's this creature here that I have never heard of anywhere else. We call it the Klickitat Ape Cat, and it is this enormous black panther creature that people have been spotting, over 120 reports of that alone. There are portals. There's people have reported missing time and spatial displacement. I've actually had that experience myself out here. And to sort of understand what's going on, this is all going on in an area called the Columbia River Gorge. And it basically, we're out here in the Pacific Northwest. The Columbia River is the largest river in North or South America that flows into the Pacific Ocean. And it separates Washington State from Oregon State. We're approximately an hour east of Portland, Oregon. And my store is in a little town called Bingen, Washington. There's 773 people who live there.
Oh my
but
gosh.
The gorge, yeah, so it's,
wow.
But this place is one of the most stunningly beautiful places in the world. In fact, back in the 80s, in a rare bipartisan move, Congress designated as the nation's first national scenic area, which means that it's basically a national park, but people can live and have businesses here. And so it enjoys many of the protections the national park does, but it's a place where you can live. And so what's unique about the Columbia River is it is basically at sea level, but it runs through the Cascade Mountains. And so you can go from the river at sea level to 3,000 feet in less than half a mile in some areas. And these are some of the
That makes my calves tired just thinking about that.
And so the western half of the gorge is sort of the wet side of the mountains. And it is a classic, brooding, moody, mysterious Pacific Northwest rainforest. We have over 90 waterfalls. Some of them are over 600 feet tall. And you've got these deep forests and streams and rivers and a very rocky and rugged terrain with deep forests. and volcanic mountains. So within 35 miles of my store, there are 3 stratovolcanoes. Mount Hood, which is a famous Bigfoot sighting area. Mount Adams, which is associated with so many UFO reports. In fact, the first UFO report in America, the Kenneth Arnold sighting back in 1947, the UFOs he saw flew directly to Mount Adams. And then there's Mount St. Helens, which famously erupted in May of 1980. And these are all 10,000 foot plus mountains. And then the east side is in the rain shadow, and that is like a desert type of terrain. And so it is austere and beautiful and spiritual in many ways. And there you'll find desert mesas with a flat top and the steep sides. There are tons of places where the Native Americans have etched petroglyphs into the stones. And it's got a whole different kind of vibe to it. And basically, I live in Escamania County, sort of on the wet side, and my store is on the east side. And I spend, about 30 minutes driving to work every day. And I go from the rainforest almost to the desert. And so I'm a former infantry soldier, a wildland forest firefighter, and a search and rescue EMT. And so I love adventure. And this place is just, you couldn't ask for a cooler area. And just in terms of there's, whitewater rafting and mountain climbing and rock climbing and hiking and all the different things. And so it is stunningly beautiful. In the springtime, the hillsides and the mountains are a riot with flowers. So there's tons of wildflowers out here. And then in the fall, right now, we've got some areas where there's this beautiful autumn foliage, and it looks like the volcanoes are alive as, you see these reds and yellows and everything. And when my mother-in-law passed away a little over 3 years ago, my wife and I inherited her businesses, and we moved down from Seattle, which was about, if you think about that, it's probably about 4,000 people per square mile. Out here, in the populated areas, it's about 10 people per square mile. And so we felt like we had won the lottery in many, many ways. And so one of the stores was kind of an outdoor store. We had to do some sprucing up to it. And I changed the logo, and on kind of a whim, I put a Sasquatch in our logo. It wasn't long before people started coming in and spontaneously telling us stories about strange experiences they were having in the wild reaches of the gorge. And people would talk about UFOs, and they would talk about Sasquatch and things even stranger than that. And I found it just fascinating that this place could possibly be populated with, these wondrous phenomenon. And I was really curious about it. So I put up a big sign in the window, and it said, "File paranormal reports here." And it listed Sasquatch sightings, UFOs, and Fey encounters, and ghosts, and everything like that. And what I wanted to do was create a safe place for ordinary people to talk about their extraordinary experiences. And I gave really special instructions to all the staff. And by the way, the staff loves it. The most fun part of everybody's job. I mean, if you think about it, in 3 years, we've had over 360 reports. And that's like every 2 or 3 days, a new Scooby-Doo mystery walks through our front door. And we could talk to people about it. And so the instructions that I gave were, we are going to take everyone seriously. We're going to believe the witness. We're going to treat them with respect, like they are adults that have something to say. And here we are, 3 years into the program, and we've earned the trust of the community. And it's gotten to the point, where I'm pretty well known in the community, and people will stop me in the grocery store or at a restaurant or, at the post office or whatever and say, "Hey, James, I got to tell you about this amazing experience I had." And what my experience of all this has been is people are sharing with me things that their family has laughed at them about, and so they clammed up about and haven't talked about for 20 years. And I'm like the second person they told. The first person just laughed at.
Wow.
And what I didn't expect, but is one of the most satisfying and beautiful parts of this whole experience, is this genuine connection that you make with somebody when they're finally believed, when they've had this remarkable experience. They don't have any kind of way to fit it into their model of reality. And you can be there and you can be supportive of them and talk about it seriously and know that you're not going to get laughed at. We're not going to think that you're crazy. And those human connections have been surprisingly satisfying and enjoyable and deeply meaningful to me. And it's been like sort of the hidden treasure of the whole experience. And so, of course we knew that if we put ourselves out there as we're going to believe the witness, I expected to get, people pranking us, and occasionally, we'll get a report signed by Seymour Butts, and it's like, okay, no harm, no foul. Like, I'm not pretending to be a scientist doing some type of scientific work here. I'm fascinated by the anthropological part of this. These are the stories that the people who live in this area tell each other. This is a part of the natural culture that's here. And I think it's part of what makes this place so unique and beautiful and interesting. It's not like there's a Starbucks and a Walmart on every corner here. In fact, in Klickitat County, that's 2,000 square miles, and there is but one stoplight in the whole area. And so, you can imagine that it's kind of it's one of the last bastions of American culture that hasn't been homogenized through corporate America. And it's really fun to have a family-owned business. We're now the second generation running these businesses. And the people who visit the area, obviously, it being as beautiful as it is here, and there's so many outdoor adventure opportunities that a lot of folks come in as tourists or visitors, and they have these unusual experiences too. The world here is filled with wonder in a very real way. And like, what a gift to have found that. I'm going to put up a picture of, this is a map that I drew. I illustrated this map of the Columbia River Gorge. Kind of shows, the western half is green. That's where the Pacific Northwest rainforest is. The eastern half is this tan color, which is where the deserts are. And you can see the three mountains that are primary to us, and all of this beautifully articulated landscape with all of these unique areas in it. Like I said, what I found fascinating was, obviously, let me say, there's a couple of people who are joshing around and, okay, great, no problem. And it's kind of fun. And then there are some people who clearly are working through some mental health issues. But really, it's a very tiny percentage. I thought it would be much, much higher. Like, I thought, we'll get a lot of hoaxsters and a lot of jokesters and people who are, clearly working through some legitimate health issues. But it turns out, no, like, I would say easily 98% of our reports are just ordinary people having extraordinary experiences. And to me, like, that's really interesting. And I think what happens is that people want to normalize their extraordinary experiences. Let me give you an example. So this Klickitat Ape Cat creature. So a gentleman came into the store close to closing time, and he had known my mother-in-law, and she had helped them out with his family out with some things. So kind of a friend of the family. And still, it took him about 45 minutes to work up the courage to tell me about his experience. And he was out orienteering. So this is using a map and compass and, trying to find your way in the wilderness. And he was in an area called the Buck Creek area, about 4 miles west of my store. And he noticed that the compass was acting weird. Now, by itself, that is not a big deal in the gorge. The government issued maps out here, have bright pink letters on them that say, warning, magnetic readings are often inaccurate in this area. And the reason why is that our geology is incredibly unique, and we have magnetic anomalies everywhere. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. And so he was orienteering off trail, compass is acting weird. And then he looked up, and across the creek was this big black cat. And, like I said, I have a lot of experience in the wilderness, decades of it. And he described this encounter with this cat, and he said, well, it was very muscular, and it had black fur, and it was just looking at me. It was completely unafraid of me, and it had a long tail. And as he was describing it, some flags are going off in my head. We have cougars out here. They're not that uncommon. Uh, Rarely seen. Cougars are very elusive creatures, but there's a few things that I know about cougars. One is they never have black fur. So cougars are normally a tawny color. And I'm going to put up a picture of a render we have of this thing. And they're typically tawny color. They are normally about 2 feet tall at the shoulder. And the creature he was describing was, see if I can get myself over here. Creature he was describing was, he said 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. And so that is way outside of the range of any kind of cougar. In fact, it's bigger than a tiger. Tigers are maybe 3 feet tall at the shoulder. And this creature he was describing was far in excess of that size.
Wow.
And also very muscular. And the other thing about cougars is they are terrified of humans, and they will abandon a fresh kill at the just the sound of human voices, let alone a human standing there. And this thing was looking straight at him. And he said that the encounter lasted for nearly 5 minutes.
Wow.
And so he, added a lot of detail to it. And, I was asking him questions, and then he paused and said, James, the strangest thing was that the creature had a face that looked like a monkey. And, it's one of those moments where my brain nearly broke. Like, I couldn't imagine how that could possibly be the case. Like, how could a cat have a face like a monkey? And it didn't make sense to me, but, not the time to interrupt. It's the time to listen. And he described it as having a no fur on its face, intelligent ape-like eyes, and a shortened snout. And it's easy to imagine that there may be with the sighting, like the light may be weird or something like that. And to be sure, now we've got 120 reports of this creature. About half of those reports describe it as having that enormous size. Everyone says that it's muscular, black fur, long black tail. But only about half the people say that it's that extraordinary 4 feet to 5 feet tall at the shoulder, approximately 900 to 1,300 pounds. And then a tiny fraction say that it's got that face that looks like a monkey. And I would say less than 10%. So, it could be reporting errors. It could be we're dealing with two different creatures, or it could be if it's supernatural, it's shape-shifting. I mean, honestly, I do not know what that component means, but fascinating, right? And so the next day I was talking to my staff and I said, hey, we got this really cool report yesterday. And one of my employees' name is Missy, and she is as honest as the day is long. And she's the kind of person that feels uncomfortable playing practical jokes on her coworkers because that's kind of like lying. And so it's not really cool. Like, she just doesn't feel right about it. And as I was describing this creature, she started shaking, and she was having this very strong emotional reaction to it. And I was watching it like, what is going on with Missy? I've never seen her respond to any of these kind of reports like that. And she said, my God, James, I've seen that thing myself. And she was driving to work one morning at dawn through Klickitat Canyon, and she saw this enormous black cat creature. It had a long black tail. She didn't get a look at its face, but she actually stopped her car to watch it. And it was so extraordinary that she wondered if she should get out of her car and talk to the people who lived in the homes nearby to warn them that there's this gigantic predator right outside of their house. She eventually elected not to do that because she was worried that they would think she was crazy. And it's a good thing she felt that way, because when she told her family about it, they all kind of laughed nervously and said, no, you probably just saw a cow. No. So think about, like, the creature that she described, the nearest analog to its size was a cow.
Wow.
That is a gigantic cat, right? So this is a grown woman, and they're telling her that she doesn't know the difference between a cat and a cow. And that is the problem that many, many witnesses encounter. They've had this extraordinary experience. Their family and friends really want to normalize it. It is a completely natural human reaction to extraordinary information. Like, life is hard enough. You don't need giant black cats running around in it, right?
Well,
so
and we try to find context within our own lives, right? To help us understand, like, well, it can't be something that I'm decades into my life journey now. There can't be a new thing I don't know about.
Exactly.
Mm.
And, I would never want to rob anyone of their defenses. Like that's just unkind. There's no reason, no need to do that. But for those of us who are exploring and are curious and fascinated, um, like you don't need to insult us for you to have your defenses.
Right.
It's so it would sort of be like if you were in your hometown and you saw a red Lamborghini drive by, a rare but extraordinary thing, and you told your friends about it. And they said, "Well, Lamborghinis aren't kind of the thing you see around here. What you probably saw was just a red minivan." And and so what I think we even do to ourselves is we turn Lamborghinis into minivans all the time. And I think, after talking to, like I said, hundreds of people have confided in me with these extraordinary experiences. What I think happens is that we talk ourselves out of extraordinary experiences. And I know that, when I was meditating a lot, I started seeing auras and different intensities of light around people and different geologic features. And I talked myself out of it. Like, oh, this can't be happening. It's something wrong with my eyes. And it's kind of you're robbing yourself because the world is filled with wonder and there is extraordinary things happen to ordinary people all the time. And when you allow there to be space, when you don't rush in and fill that unknowingness with something you think you know, that is when your world transforms. Like I said, I told you, I feel like we won the lottery.
Mhm.
I live in a magical, wondrous world. And it's because I've allowed things through the gates. And there are some things that people report, like, so a guy sent me a picture from his trail cam and it looked for all the world like a black cat leaping. But it was weird because it was like only a second of time. And, the images before and the images after it didn't have this black cat leaping in it. Well, when I did image analysis on it, it turned out, oh, this is actually a crow. And the way that it was positioned in that moment of flight gave it the appearance of a cat leaping. And so, yes, it's true that there are times when you're enthusiastically mistaken or, and it's important to do that kind of work. But with this cat, now we have had so many reports, including senior law enforcement officials, local leaders, tons of people have seen it. People have seen it. The reports go back all the way to 1968. We have reports of it with cubs, so younglings. So we know that it's whatever it is, it's a reproducing population out here. I'll put up a picture. The gorge is one of the most important archaeological sites in America, and people have lived here since before the pyramids were built in Egypt. And
Wow.
so we go back 15,000 years in the gorge. And there are petroglyphs on the walls. And it turns out that I may have actually seen this cat myself, but I didn't know it because it came before any of the reports. So I'm going to put up a petroglyph picture here. And I hope you can see this.
Oh,
This is
wow.
an area of the desert called the Horse Thief Lake and Horse Thief Butte. And so Horse Thief Butte looks like a classic desert mesa, steep sides, flat top, and it's right alongside the Columbia River. And from the road, it looks like this impenetrable monolith. But when you get close to it, it's riddled with a labyrinth of hidden passageways and natural amphitheaters, and there are petroglyphs on the wall. It was a site of profound spiritual importance to the Native Americans of the area. And there's the mesa, and then there's this sort of flat plain, and then another drop into a lake called Horse Thief Lake. And then on the far side of the lake are all these petroglyphs. And what we're looking at is what looks like a strange cat-like creature with wavy water lines underneath its head and a crack that goes to those water lines. And so I was in Horse Thief's Butte, climbing around in the rocks, and I was looking down into the river. It was near sunset, and I saw this very large, dark-furred creature swimming around in the lake. There were ducks and things like that on the water, so I could kind of get a sense of its size. And it was easily bigger than a man, but smaller than a car. I was probably 700 yards away, and I really couldn't make it out. And it was sort of patrolling the center of the lake, and it would submerge from time for up to 5 minutes and then come back up. And I could not figure out what the heck I was looking at. I had never seen a creature that big swimming. We have bear here, black bear mostly. And they're swimmers, but they're not that big and they never submerge for 5 minutes. And they're typically point-to-point swimmers. They're not going to patrol around the center of a lake. Elk is another creature that might be that big, but point-to-point swimmer, not a submersible. And so what the heck am I looking at? And since all these reports have come in, there's only one big black cat in North America. It's a jaguar. Jaguars are some of the best riverine hunters in the world. And they can hold their breath for up to 15 minutes. They can swim a kilometer in the open ocean. They're extremely adept at river hunting. They can eat underwater. They're remarkable creatures. But their range is 1,000 miles south of here. So how one of those could have been in our area, I don't know. And they're about the size of cougars. They're never that large. And so this petroglyph got me really curious. Like, is there any kind of legends here? And I did find some Native American traditions that talk about a race of supernatural protectors. They're referred to as the Mishepashu. And they're described as underwater panther protectors. It's a race of creatures, supernatural beings that live in the underwater realm. And when Native Americans talk about the underwater realm, or the sky realm, or the earth realm, they're talking about something that has 1 foot in our reality and 1 foot in the spirit world. The most amazing thing about the Mishepashu is they're described as looking like a big black panther with the face of a man. And so that may be one of the places where this is coming from. This creature may have been here for thousands of years. We don't know, but we do know that the petroglyphs seem to indicate that is. And what's really fascinating to me is that there are wavy water lines underneath this creature's head in the petroglyph image. So it's fascinating stuff. And, how these things fit together, it turns out that in the fossil record, there is a creature that matches the size and weight of the reported Klickitat ape cat. This creature is a North American line. It lived here in Washington State. In fact, all over North America during the Ice Age. It's said to have gone extinct about 10,000 years ago. Its scientific name is the Panther atrox, and it was a cat, the biggest cat that ever lived. And its reported size is 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder, weighing 900 to 1,300 pounds. It's very well represented in the fossil record, so much so that we know that it is sexually dimorphic, which means the females are much smaller than the males. What I find fascinating about that fact is that our reports are about 50% of them say the creature is enormous, and 50% say, no, it's about a little bit bigger than a normal cougar. So anyway, it remains a mystery. I do not know where this thing came from, what it is. I do firmly believe that the people who are reporting it are making honest reports. People say, yeah, I was driving by Mount St. Helens and the thing leaped into the road in front of me. It was as tall as the hood of my Jeep Rubicon, and then it leapt off into the forest. And
So with like the man that you talked about that had the 5-minute encounter and his compass was going crazy, because I've heard you say like predator and it's huge and it's muscular and it's heavy and all of these things, but he was face to face with it for 5 minutes and then he was able to walk away and report it. So I'm just trying to get, and then also you talked about protector potentially. So is there a sense of like friend or foe?
it's one of the most curious components of this whole story. We have no reports of hostile encounters. There was one guy who shot at it with his .22 because he thought it was going to eat his goats. But that is like as far as it goes. I have never heard a story where it actively threatens humans. Many, many, many stories of it being completely unafraid of humans, right? And like approaching them, walking towards them, but never one where it is acting in a hostile manner. And it's another part of the mystery to me. This is, obviously, if it's just a biological creature, doesn't have any, maybe it's an escaped exotic pet, or, I mentioned earlier that was an animal testing laboratory, part of the Hanford nuclear site upriver. there's a pretty good case to be made that it might have escaped from their animal testing laboratory over there. But whatever it is not acting like a normal wild animal. I'm so convinced that this thing is real that I am getting ready to offer a pretty big financial reward for anyone who can bring me footage that we can verify of it, because I think that we have an animal living here that is not currently recognized by science. And, so who knows? I am kind of in love with the thing. Like, I think it is, I love this notion that, that in our world, these panther protectors are afoot. And
I
who knows?
love that too. That's incredible. And, we haven't gotten yet into Sasquatch, but, with Bigfoot, I don't know if it's like offensive to call Sasquatch Bigfoot.
Doesn't offend me.
Okay. I hope they're cool with it. But there are often reports of telepathy with Sasquatch, and that even though there may not be like, verbal communication, there people do receive messages or instruction. Is that ever part of any of these reports? It's just interesting with the human or the more human head that maybe indicates that there are more humanoid or primate characteristics. And then you've also mentioned that there might be like a supernatural element to it. Do any of them feel, or even just like a felt sense of like, I felt safe, or I felt protected, or I felt that there was animosity, or anything like that?
We have had scores and scores of Bigfoot sightings. None of them have been hostile. The Native Americans here refer to them as the forest people. And there are stories that they have treaties with the Native American folks in the area for berry picking areas and mushroom picking areas and salmon areas. And those are these respective relationships that have existed for thousands of years. And I think that they're related in some ways. And so with the cat, we have had reports where people feel like they've been in the presence of something magical. Like that's the reported experience. Some people, it's like, that scared the crap out of me. And it jumped across the trail in front of my, four-wheel ATV, and I never saw it again. And that was the whole encounter. But for other people, especially like the guy who spent some time with it, like there was a feeling of, I am experiencing something extraordinary, and it wasn't a terrorizing kind of feeling. And this is a good time to start talking about some of those Bigfoot encounters, because they are often the same way. And what a lot of witnesses tell me is they have the feeling that they want to protect the Sasquatch or the ape cat. Like it elicits the emotion of not wanting to mess with this creature or have it be harried or have people come into conflict with it. Like they're often not cagey about telling me they had the experience. They're cagey about telling me exactly where, because they don't want anyone else to go there and mess with the creature, right? With a sense of protecting it rather than anything else. So Skamania County, which is where my home is, it was the first place in the world, first governmental body in the world to enact Bigfoot protection legislation. And so we take it pretty seriously out here. And if you shoot and kill a Bigfoot in Skamania County and the coroner deems that it's a humanoid, you'll be charged with manslaughter. So there's this real ethic of these are our forest neighbors out here. There's one guy who has seen 14 Bigfoot on his property at one time, and he has had numerous encounters. He's brought in hair samples. And so and I've been to his place on a couple of different occasions. And I said, do you think that this is a biological creature, or do you think it's some type of spiritual creature? He said, well, it's definitely a biological animal. It poops in the woods and it, leaves footprints, and, he's seen it, take down other prey and stuff like that. He's heard them give birth. He's seen the younglings, he's got a whole range of different colors of their fur. And then he'll say, but they do seem to have the ability to do limited teleportation. And so they'll be traveling away from you, and then in a blink of an eye, they'll travel 75 yards. And how they cover that distance seems like it's some type of impossible physical feat to be able to do. And what it seems like, and this is supported by a lot of the Native American traditions, is they have the ability to influence people's minds in some way. The mechanism is unclear to anyone who tells me this story, but I've had experiences like this myself. And so a lot of times there's one area out here, it's the Monte Cristo Natural Preserve. The locals just call it Monster Mountain because there are so many Bigfoot sightings in this area. And they will have, the classic thing is to have rocks thrown, and that, okay, that's definitely not a bear or any other kind of animal. To be able to throw something is different. And there are stick knockings. There are people who'll be out there, panning for gold or whatever, and they'll hear like 3 of these creatures communicating, and they'll seem to have different personalities talking about the people that are, having the experience in a language they don't understand. Oftentimes, these people will say, yeah, I was traveling back to my car and I was, a 2-hour hike, and it seems like 5 minutes passed and I found myself, 50 yards from the trailhead where my car was. And so there seems to be this ability to befuddle the mind in some way. And I had this experience myself. And it kind of threw me for a loop. It really was a remarkable thing. So we have this area out here on a lot of maps. It's called the Big Lava Bed. We call it Broke Leg Barrows. It's basically a ground level volcano started spewing out lava 8,000 years ago. And it created this giant jumbled mass of rocks. It filled an entire mountain valley. The area is about the size of the island of Manhattan, just so you get a sense of scale for it. And this place, compasses don't work there, and cell phones don't work there. And, I have been a professional land navigator since I was a teenager with the military. And I am, as a search and rescue EMT, me being able to navigate in the woods, people's lives depend on it. And so that's one skill that I am not bragging when I say I am amongst the best at that. And I don't remember ever being lost. Like it's something that just doesn't happen to me. And when you do this, and people's lives are on the line, you have a whole bunch of things that you're doing when you're in the wilderness areas. If I've been in an area, it's just like me seeing a face, like, I will automatically recognize it again, and you're keeping track of your pace and landmarks and the position of the sun. And there's a whole set of things that are processing in the background while you're doing it. Well, I was in this lava bed. We've had some strange reports in there, Bigfoot and a number of other things out there. And oftentimes the lava will flow through an area. The top of the lava will harden and the lava will flow through and leave a tube-like cavity called a lava tube. And we have over 600 caves in the area. And so there's a lot of these lava tubes. And then sometimes those lava tubes will collapse and they'll create these trenches. So I had found this trench. Let's just imagine, for the sake of simplicity, it's a north-south trench. I had my drone out there, flew up and down this trench a bunch of times. Really cool, interesting, unique features. I walked to the end of it. I took basically I turned west and I walked another 400 yards and I found another trench. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. So I got out the drone again and flew it up and back and forth. And like waking up from a dream, I realized that I was actually at the south end of the very first trench that I had been in. So what had happened was I had traveled what I thought was 800 meters, 800 yards, deeper into the lava bed, convinced that my navigational skills were doing what they always do and keeping me aware of where I was and where I was going and where I should be. And like I said, like as though I was waking up from a dream, I realized that I was in a place that I had already been, basically the place that I had started, and I had no knowledge of how I got there. And it really threw me for a loop. Like I have never been that turned around in the wilderness since I was 8 years old. And I couldn't figure out like how in the heck did I get from way, 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 way over there back to my starting point, a place that I had been in and studied and should have recognized. Like it would be like if we turned off the screen for a second and we turned it back on and you didn't recognize my face. Like, that's how unsettling it was. Like, have I met you before? That kind of a thing. And so very, very strange. And my initial response was, what the heck just happened to me? Like, how could this possibly be that I got that turned around, that I'm facing the completely wrong direction, and I'm, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yards away from where I thought I was? So that was the first emotion, was like, what the heck? This is crazy. And then the second emotion was, if something didn't want me to go deeper into this forest, this was the most benevolent way I can imagine of bumping me back to start and saying, not today, son, this is not for you. And you don't need to be in this place. And we're going to gently pick you up, seamlessly edit your memories, and put you back in a place of relative safety where you can get out. My car was just 100 yards away, and I could see it from this spot, parked at the edge of the lava bed. And like, that was just an astonishing moment for me. Like, it was kind of exciting because I've been hearing hundreds of stories from other people about these incredible experiences they were having, and then happened to me. And, how can you prove that you were confused in the woods, or you got lost in the woods? It doesn't sound like a very dramatic story, but like I said, for me, with the amount of world-class training that I have in this particular skill. And the other weird thing was that what I thought was 15 minutes had passed, and it really was 2 hours. And so a very weird experience. And so this notion that these beings may be able to influence our minds is certainly something that I have firsthand knowledge of, and it seems like there may be something to it.
That's fascinating. Well, and I am curious about the same sort of question as with the ape cat, with the Sasquatch. When you have accumulated these reports from people, are they always friendly? Does it vary? Because I had a guest on recently, Dr. Simeon Hine.
Oh yeah, Simeon.
Yeah.
I know him well.
Yeah, I had him on just a couple of days ago, and we did get to talk about Bigfoot a bit, and I had a similar question for him about, because I'm always drawn to the friendly stories, the protector stories, the leaving offerings, and that they want to interact, and the multidimensionality of them. And so, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this. I just enjoy hearing about it. So, what flavor are the reports in those terms?
So anytime you see an enormous predator, there is a instant effect. This one gal, she was camping with her family, and she got out in the middle of the night to go pee out of the tent, and she saw the cat standing on a log, so its flank was to her, and she was like, what is this thing? And it hopped off the log and started walking in her general direction. And she was like, I'm out. She dove back into her tent and she's up with her family. And no negative encounter happened. And then she showed me a picture of like 5 of her family members standing on that log. And she said, yeah, the creature was as long as all 5 of these people standing next to each other.
Wow.
And so her experience was, wow, what the hell is like you're not expecting to see this giant cat. But absolutely no attack, no messing with you or anything like that. And so we have a lot of people who just have the surprise of seeing a giant, 1,300-pound animal that registers as predator in our lizard brains. So of course that's a moment of, but the thing that is so remarkable to me is that there are no hostile encounters. There are no moments where it attacks a human being or even threatens a human being.
And with the Sasquatch?
Yeah. And so there are no reports of that either. And, it could very well be that there is some type of, think about radio waves, right? So if your car is tuned to country music, let's just say, and you didn't know that you could change the channel, and every day you drive around, it's country music, and you think, oh, this is reality, country music. But there is also a radio signal for classical music, and there's a radio signal for rock and roll music, and there's a radio signal for talk radio and everything else. But because your tuner is only set to country, that's the reality that you experience, and you believe, yep, this is all that there is. But if something happened to you And that electromagnetic tuner got adjusted, and suddenly your world is the same, but instead of hearing country music, you hear classical music. That's an extraordinary moment, right? And it's not that these things don't exist. It's just that you're not tuned to receive them, right? And I think that is what the nature of a lot of the phenomenon that we have out here is. The gorge, as I mentioned at the beginning, is this incredibly unique electromagnetic environment. Really briefly, the river has been here for 20 million years. 17 million years ago, this giant fissure opened in the earth at the Idaho-Washington border, and trillions of tons of lava poured out of it and flowed 300 miles all the way through the old Columbia River Valley to the ocean. These eruptions happened, they think, over 300 times, and they built up the walls that are now the gorge. So what happened is, as that lava flowed, it would start to cool, and all of the magnetic material in the rock would orient towards the Earth's magnetic North Pole, and then it would cool and harden, and then it would get locked. And so that's the unique magnetic signature of that layer. Well, we've got, 15, 20 layers visible here in the gorge. 1,000 years, 10,000 years pass, this next lava flow comes through. But the Earth's magnetic North Pole has wandered. In the past 100 years, it's wandered 700 miles. And so that next layer, its stuff orients to the new magnetic North Pole and locks in place. So you've got these layers, and each one of them has a unique magnetic signature to it. And so it creates this really unusual magnetic environment. So back in the 80s, there was a professor at Lordstown University up in Ontario, Canada. His name was Dr. Michael Persinger. And he did studies where he wanted to see what happened if you manipulated magnetic fields around the human brain. Turns out in our brains, we have magnetite crystals, and they're housed in magnesomes. And these are structures that lie alongside of our brain cells. They're highly concentrated in the hippocampus and the temporal lobes. And magnetite is one of the most magnetically reactive substances on Earth. And there are over 5 million of these per gram of human brain matter. And what happens is those little crystals in these sheaths, when they encounter magnetic fields, they begin to torque, and they exert an influence on the human brain. In fact, they think this is how animals are able to navigate over long distances through a magnetosense. But what Dr. Persinger found was that he could induce paranormal-like experiences in a controlled way. Most often, people reported a sensed presence, like there was something else in the room with them. And a few of his subjects claimed to have met God in this particular experience. And so the helmet that he had created then became known in the media as the God helmet. Fascinating stuff to look up, the God helmet, Dr. Michael Persinger. The point is, he was also able to do things like turn fear on and off like a switch. And so there's this physical mechanism built into our brains, which is responsive to electromagnetic fields. And the gorge is this really complex, nuanced electromagnetic environment. And these lava beds are all about that, right? And so there may be this thing that's happening where our electromagnetic tuner, our brains, are getting adjusted while people are here, which is why we are one of the most active paranormal hotspots in North America. It's not because this stuff is here and it's nowhere else. It's because people are getting their tuners adjusted when they're here, and they're able to see things. Now, the obvious question is, okay, so is this some kind of personal internal hallucination? And I don't think that's the case, because we have photographic evidence of glowing orbs and UFOs. We have footprints. We have, hair samples. And we have many encounters where there are multiple witnesses. And so it's really difficult to say, okay, this person is having the same hallucination as this other person. So I think, and again, it's a fascinating citizen scientist project to sort of puzzle through. Is there something about this place that is changing our tuners and allowing us to perceive things that are always present, but not available to our normal sensory perception?
That is fascinating. Do
I
you
think
want
that'd
to
be a lot of fun.
share any of the photos? Because you mentioned you've got photographic evidence of
Yeah.
like the
So
18th
one of the things that we get many, many reports about is glowing orbs. And these sometimes they are more of a personal type of situation where they seem like they are like something you'd encounter in the forest. Other times they feel more like UFOs, like they're craft that are flying around. So this is taken of the gorge, an area called Spring Creek Hatchery. And I was fascinated by this beam of light that you can see coming down there. Well, I was snapping pictures and then this thing showed up. And we know that this is not a lens flare because lens flares are typically perfectly circular. They are monochromatic, so there's no information inside of them. And the halos that they produce are usually directional. And so this is I was astonished that I was actually able to capture it on film because my wife and I have seen these with our naked eye while driving. And we have many reports of people who are driving and see these things as well. We know that they're not headlights because here's a truck and I think there's a car. So definitely not some type of headlight phenomenon, not swamp gas. We can see the direction of light. The lens flare is going to come from, the light has to be behind the lens flare. So what this thing is, we don't know. That's one of the kind of things that people are reporting. This is what that Broke Leg Barrows area looks like, the area where I had that strange experience. And you can see what just a wild, incredible kind of landscape it is, very articulated with all the broken rock. This is a picture of a UFO that was taken over Underwood Mountain. This was taken from 12 miles away. We did some image enhancement to it. And here you can see that there are no wings or rotors. So it's a possible UFO. It looks very much like the Tic Tac shaped UFOs that the Navy fighter jets captured on their gun cameras. So yeah, we have lots of stuff like that. This is an example of one of these lava tube caves. And you can see how this fall foliage is just stunning. It looks like there's still lava in the cave right now. But the place, like I said, it feels like living in a magical kingdom. This is the core of an ancient volcano called Beacon Rock. What's really neat is there is a trail that gets to the top of that. You basically climb up these, switchback ladders and stuff like that to get to the top. Really kind of a cool thing.
That looks a lot like is it Devil's Tower?
Yeah.
In where, Montana, maybe that is, or?
Part of the fun for me is I took my Toyota FJ Cruiser and turned it into a paranormal investigation vehicle. And so I get to tool around on this thing and follow up on all these reports. It's a ton of fun. Cool. Just a couple of images. Again, this is Broke Leg Barrows showing the highly articulated landscape. And you can see how these trenches here are sort of these collapsed lava tubes and how you can get your car right up next to it. But once you're in it, there's nothing else you can do.
No road or anything. I do have one more question as we wrap up here in terms of just with the landscape, with the terrain, and then with all of these paranormal things, particularly Sasquatch and the UFOs, do people go missing in the area very often?
Yeah. In fact, in that Broke Leg Barrows, there's over 24 missing folks. And and some under really mysterious circumstances. And so it's one of the things that, it's a full-on expedition level wilderness area. And so there's all the classic natural dangers that you would find. And with this Broke Leg Barrows area, you can imagine there are hidden caves and there's the opportunity for you to fall into a sinkhole into one of these caves and never be found again. But there are other stories that seem to have more never be found again. A lot of people, I only know that, so the store is a very cheerful place. We have bright colors on the walls. We always have fun music playing and there's incense. We sell adventure gear, but we also sell like crystals and divination boards and all that kind of stuff. But it was important for me to create a place where the energy was positive. If I'm inviting all this weirdness into the lives of my employees, one of the first lines of defense is having a high vibration kind of a place, and so very proud because the store has won 13 Best of the Gorge awards.
Oh my gosh.
Including,
Congratulations.
best outdoor outfitter and best place to take an out-of-town guest and best attraction and best gift store and best place to work. But a lot of that has to do with when we took over these businesses, I said, our number one North Star is that this is going to be a joyful, healthy, and fun place to work. And anything that comes after that will be great. And it turns out that we've been incredibly successful, both with the awards and financially. And, we're everyone's kind of favorite store. And it's not by accident. The reason I'm bringing it now is that we don't get a lot of super scary stories in the store. It kind of bounces off. Like, we're not a easy landing place for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't, like, when people think, oh, my friend went missing, then like it was paranormal, that's that sort of where their mind goes to. And also because of the joy that we project, a lot of the like darker type of stories we don't hear about. And I think that that's kind of a sort of a self-selection kind of a situation. Those stories may be out there, but just not a part of what we experience. I can tell you the experience that I had where I get bounced out of going deeper into this place. And I can tell you, it is big enough that there could be 7 Ewok villages of Sasquatches out there and no one would know. Like, it is, and after I got over my initial befuddlement, like complete flamboozlement of what had happened to me, the first thought that I had was, this was a very benevolent way to put me back in a safe place. Like, that was like where my mind went immediately, not like, oh, I was probed or had some kind of negative or hostile encounter where things happened outside of my own volition. It was, no, we're going to protect you and we're going to protect ourselves and we're going to do this in this, very loving and gentle way.
Gentle. Yeah.
And so that's my personal experience. I think you get what you bring a lot of times, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're naturally a fearful person, that's going to color your experience.
Your perception. Absolutely.
If people want to learn more about what we're up to, best place to go is margiesoutdoorstore.com, or just Margie's Outdoor will get you there too, margiesoutdoor.com. We are on Facebook. We're getting ready to put up podcasts. When that happens, I'll let folks know. But if you are on our Facebook page or on our Instagram page, Margie's Outdoor Store, you'll get all the updates about all the cool stuff we're doing. And we hope to be able to invite people along in some of our investigations with some future filming projects that we got. So
that's amazing.
Go to those things, subscribe, like, follow. And when we start having some awesome content to share, you'll be the first to know.
That's amazing. And does the store offer like excursions and things like if somebody was like, I want to come and see, but can somebody show me around?
Well, we've got that big map, which, we looked at earlier, and that has the locations of many of our sightings on it. That's for sale in the store. We also have 2 guided, self-guided tours. So we call them Arcane Adventure Maps, and they cover that Horse Thief Butte area that I talked about that has the petroglyphs and that sort of mysterious and spiritual area out there. And another one of Beacon Rock, which is that volcanic core and some of the interesting things that have happened around that area. Again, I'm trying to get this stuff out there. I'm running a couple of businesses, and so it's my list of stuff that I want to do versus stuff I've actually been able to put to bed is out of balance right now. So.
Yeah. Well, James, this has just been fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on. And I can't wait to have you back so we can talk about portals and so forth. So thank you very much for sharing your stories.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meditation Conversation. I would be so grateful if you would take a moment and share this episode with someone in your life who would appreciate it. Your sharing helps to build momentum and make high vibrational content such as this more accessible and easier to find. And I'd also be so grateful for you to subscribe to this content. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next meditation conversation.